Good afternoon, everyone. Let me hope you can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Leading with Light. This afternoon, of course, I'm having some issues with my camera, so it's just my voice. I hope you're hearing me. Just let me know if you're hearing. Good. With Light is a program that we have every week on my podcast talking about everything life and leadership. For those who don't know me, I am Dr. Marcia Thomas, and I am a faith-based leadership consultant and life coach. I help mainly women leaders to press into their purpose, live their purpose with joy, and also lead with light. The light that comes from knowing yourself and the light that comes from carrying your expertise consciously. The light that comes from becoming masters of your own destiny. So I want to say welcome. Welcome to those who are joining me on LinkedIn and those who are joining on YouTube. Today we want to talk about breaking free from the leadership ownership trap. So I want to introduce a reset for high achieving leaders. This topic is very important to me because I am looking at leadership that has become very heavy in our society, very complex, very different. It's evolving into something that is becoming not as familiar as it used to be. And so in my book, A Leader Like You, I talk about leadership revelation and I talk about leadership theory. The revelation of leadership is becoming very heavy. It's different in these heavy times. And that's why I want to talk about ownership, because the heavier leadership gets, it's the more it propels you to think that you must own leadership. But you're not a owner, you're just a steward. You have been given gifts and talents, and you have been placed in positions of responsibility to steward the purpose, to understand your purpose, to live your purpose, and to press into your calling. Purpose in itself is service, and it includes others and not you. So your purpose is really to serve others and not to serve yourself, to make others become masters of their own destiny so they can test themselves to see what they can produce and identify in themselves also their purpose. A lot of people, as I have established in previous podcasts, they know their role, but they sometimes get confused with what their purpose is, because your role is different from your purpose. But your purpose can be fulfilled in the roles and responsibilities that you're given, because those are opportunities to sometimes prepare you, because there are levels of preparation and there are levels of growth and purpose, and also to equip you. So you are trained in private, but you must show up publicly. So purpose prepares you in private, because before you were born, God knew you and established your purpose. What is it that you are born to do? You're created to do, the problem you were created to solve, and who it is that you must help to solve those problems. And so after you have established that and you know your purpose can become blurred. And we talked about that in the session last week. Welcome, Simone. Welcome, Frank. Thanks for joining. Nastasia, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, or Nastasia. Thank you for joining. I see you, Kira. Thank you so much for joining. All right. So sometimes leadership feels very heavy, extremely heavy, because we are pulled in all sorts of directions. As I said last week, we are all things to all men. Everybody expects us to show up, to always be present, and to be the problem solver. We must understand it sometimes too. As we get into the position, we had promised all sorts of solutions because we had looked at the action plan, we had looked at the data, we had done some homework, and we knew what the problems were, the cores, and we promised that we would make a difference and we would transform the organization in a certain way. And so with everything that is out there, the different cries, the different demands, the different things that you have to pay attention to, the decisions that you have to make very quickly, how you deal with crisis, all of that can become very overwhelming. But leadership in itself doesn't have to feel heavy. You can lead with clarity, energy, and purpose. And so today, we really want to shift from pressure to presence. So we have to acknowledge that leadership, even in the good times, even when you are able to lead with clarity, energy, and purpose, is heavy. It's very heavy, but how you carry it depends on your mindset and your preparation, your self-care and your soul care. So I want to remind us, because sometimes we don't remember that we don't have to carry everything to lead effectively. And so the question I want to ask you, because I want to talk to those persons today who are stuck in the ownership trap, do you feel like everything depends on you? So what do I mean? You don't have to carry everything to lead effectively. So if leadership feels heavy, if it feels like everything is on you, then you need to understand that you're in that ownership trap. So how do you know when you're in your ownership trap? How do you know? Feeling responsible for everything. You feel that everything is on you. And every outcome is yours. And every decision is yours. And nothing will go right unless you do it yourself or you micromanage mature persons who are equipped and who were hired for their expertise. You micromanage them and double check everything they do. You also have a difficulty delegating or letting go. And so sometimes you even go the extra mile to have persons who will represent you submit their presentations for you to make the changes and reflect exactly what you want to say. And notice the term there, exactly. And so you become a mother hen. And so persons wait on you. Good, productive persons who can think for themselves, who are creative and very innovative. Because of this type of ownership, micromanaging, you'll find that they become disgruntled and they really and truly do not put themselves out of the way to be innovative or creative because it doesn't really matter. And so they wait on you because they know that this might change and this might not go the way they have structured it, because it must go the way you exactly want it to be structured. And we had identified you as a dangerous leader. And so the emotional and mental overload that you carry because of this ownership trap is very tremendous. And many of you normalize the ownership trap as care, leadership care, especially when you're high performance who can't afford to fall off the standard that you have set. And everybody must live up to that standard. And so you, for example, as a school leader or an executive, review every decision instead of trusting those who are in those departments to carry them out, who are experts and who you are training and who you collaborate with and who understands the mission and the vision of the organization and who have bought into it and who themselves have excelled and are doing well and are currently holding their own. And so I say every time that you are born to do anything, but you are not created to do everything. And so you need to understand that just because you can carry doesn't mean you should. And so I ask you the question as we move along, what are you currently holding that may not actually be yours to own in your home as a leader and in your organization? Because sometimes we own things that were never ours to own, and we make our children become helpless, learn helplessness because we want to make sure that they don't have any issues at all. And we, especially if we had issues, and so their resilience is compromised because we have it under a cloak of care. So we macromanage under a cloak of care, and we macromanage under a cloak of loyalty, and we macromanage under a cloak of excellence, and we macromanage under the cloak of training, and yet we are afraid to delegate and so on. Now, why do leaders fall into this trap? It's very important. What are the drivers? And I want to talk about the identity that you tie to your title or to your responsibilities as a leader, and how you tie this identity to be needed. Nothing can happen without you. And so even when you're not at work, there are no cutoff points. If you have to be absent, if you have to go to a conference, if you have to go to a workshop, you constantly text or call persons to make sure that things are running correctly. And then there is this, it's really tied to the fear of failure or the fear of losing control. And many leaders didn't start off owning their job, but the more experienced you become is the more you take on ownership instead of stewarding. So you focus on the outcomes and you are particular with the profits and the productivity rather than the people and how you must equip them through systems. And there's a fear of looking bad, which is the belief that if I don't do it, it won't get done right. Very much so, Dr. Leslie. This level of leadership that you're speaking about need to understand how their own fears get in the way of letting go. It happens at all levels. The executive level, the middle management level, and the beginning level, and it is more crucial at the executive level because persons have established themselves, their brand, the type of leadership. Persons get to know them, especially if they are thriving as excellent or exceptional leaders, and they know that the structure in itself, the informal structure in any organization, is greater than the formal structure. And so they have to micromanage these systems, but they have to depend on leaders, middle managers. They have to depend on department heads and so on. And to hold it all together, they tend to have meetings, a lot of them. And so they're bogged down with meetings. They fill their calendars. They have to become accountable to their boards for the outcomes and so on. And they tend to drill down so that because they are the final accountable officers and the buck stops with them. And so they tend to drill down, especially when they have not created structures or systems that manipulate trust and that honors expertise that is balanced with loyalty. And so this fear of judgment or self-criticism distorts them and keep them trapped into ownership of all these things instead of stewarding the cause and the vision. And so it isn't the workload, it isn't the expectations, it really isn't the organizational goals, it's really not the mission, it's the identity and conditioning that comes from the perks and also the authority that you have been given in your role. And so your expectations shift and your conditioning take root so that you begin to focus on your identity and tie it to the outcomes and tie it to the mission of the organization. It becomes it is placed at the forefront of everything because you begin to focus on you and what it means for you and how it is going to impact or affects you and how it's going to make you look when there is a shortfall or there is a fallout. And so this type of conditioning, because of the expectations of those above you, of the board, of all stakeholders, the multiple calls can make you distort your vision and purpose, can become very heavy, can cause you to lose sleep, can cause you to become sick, can burn you out if you do not have it under control. And control in itself also can be disguised as care. So you push people, you test them to see what they can produce. Those who are doing well, you hold them very close to you, and those who are not managing, you have them at a certain point, and you sometimes undermine instead of support them because the fear of criticism or judgment is so overwhelming. It is bearing down on you as a leader that you forget that it is your people who make you look good because you are not an island. And you really can't do everything, no matter how hard you try. And no matter how you believe that if you don't do it, it won't get done. And there are some persons who do their job so well, you become dependent on them, and you in turn overwork them because they are the dependable ones, and they show up at all times. They're ever present and they're always on their A game, but they themselves become burnout and overwhelmed because of the expectations and the added responsibilities that they get from doing what they do well. So a lot of times, as executives and leaders in our organization, we overwork those who do well instead of building and supporting those who are not doing well so that they can come up to the par and it can be a balanced equation. So we have to make sure that we understand and we are not confusing control with care. Now we know that this type of ownership, it costs us a lot. So what is it really costing you? It's costing you your independence, because if you feel that everything depends on you and that you must be doing everything in your organization or micromanaging so that if it is done correctly, then you get burnt out. And there is decision fatigue because you make every single decision, even though persons are capable enough to help to make those decisions in their departments. And so the real cost is that you become disconnected, you become burnt out, and the disconnection doesn't show until you are separated from the position. Either that your body says to you, I'm tired, or there's a breakdown, or you have to take gap because of brain fog, or the doctor says to you, you can't keep pushing yourself because if you do that, then you're going to find yourself with a crisis, a health crisis. And so you begin to take a little step back. And as you begin to step back, you realize that you are fully disconnected. You were just going through the motions. You're showing up. You were present. You were productive, but you didn't have it all together. Very much so. Dr. Leslie, fear and the anxiety cause a very low cellular vibration, and move us into disease. Very much so, the point I was making, because it makes you literally sick. And sometimes you get so much pains, you get so much issues, you have problems, you go to the doctor, they don't know what it is because every test comes back good. It's because you are not sick. It's the fear and anxiety that is showing up with these aches and pains that medication cannot fix, and also sleep, because you sleep, but you wake up so tired and disconnected because the fear and the anxiety, that vibration, low cellular vibration, pushes you into crisis mode at all times. You're always on alert. You sometimes become pessimistic because you expect bad things to happen, and your affirmations are not working because it is expressed with a lot of doubt. And so fear becomes the shadow side of our identity, very much so. And so we disempower teams as much as we disempower ourselves, because when a leader's team is disempowered, a leader cannot do well. And it shows up as an infestation or a lack of trust. So it shows up as an infestation of persons feeling undervalued and underappreciated. And so they do the bare minimum. They make choices. They begin to choose themselves. They begin to look outside of the organization. The loyalty becomes diminished, and they are actually not committed because they are disempowered. They have to be waiting, and when they do their best, it is analyzed and changes are made that suits only the leader. There is not the scope for flexibility, and innovation and creativity becomes discarded because persons are looking that no matter what they do, something else is put on in place, and something things change, and this makes persons silently become very silent critiques, and that's the most dangerous critiques in any organization. And so persons no longer look forward to come to work because of the owner and not the steward. And this owner shows up in different ways, not meaning to not value or appreciate people, not meaning to appear to be nonchalant and uncaring. This leader is really a compassionate person. It's really a proactive person, strategic, a transformational individual. But because the vision becomes now blurred and the purpose is now put on default because of the outcomes and the deadlines and the agenda of the organization and board members, there is this confusion that pushes them to become owners instead of stewards, especially with time constraints. And so the creativity that they also have and the joy, they lose it. They lose it because they tie themselves to the awards and the accolades and the performance index and the accountability matrix that are put out in these organizations that say when these are met, you do well. And so we have to be very careful. So I say to you, you need to redefine your leadership, where you move from owner to steward. You move from ownership to stewardship. You begin to steward your relationships. And in that way, when you steward your relationships, you actively listen to what is said and not said. You build trust through respect and vulnerability. You allow persons to make mistakes and give them room to grow and develop in your organization. You yourself grow by getting rid of your old ways, and you become very open and flexible to learn new things and to actually express to your team members and those who are all valuable in your organization what you have mastered and what you're still learning. And you allow them to do the same. And you actually grow together. You also look at how you delegate. Becoming a steward means that you reward and you honor expertise as much as you honor loyalty. Because some of us delegate because persons are loyal and show up, but they are not great team leaders. And it also costs you because you spend a lot of time dealing with operational issues and also personality clash and team conflicts because you miss delegating. So you have to learn how to balance loyalty with expertise, and you have to know which must take the higher ground when you are delegating based on the outcomes that you desire, your desired outcomes. Because leadership is really not control, it's guidance. So you have to shift your mindset from everything depends on me to I create conditions with trust as the leadership strategy, where you begin to trust persons, so you begin to share your authority. You begin to trust persons because they have showed up and validated themselves as being trustworthy. And so you begin to give them responsibility, knowing that they will carry it out just the way the organization wants it. The practice, based on the practice and the principles that are outlined, and the fact that you have really authentically proven yourself to be very capable. When you shift also from I create conditions to trust as a leadership strategy, you find that you allow persons to test themselves to see what they can produce. And when they feel that they are given that type of autonomy, then you actually leave room for others to rise. Because many times, what is overowned that is costing you your energy is also costing your team, and it is costing you your impact. How are you, Christy? Thanks for joining. All right. So when you hold everything, when you micromanage, when you feel that your organization can't do without you, and if you don't do it, it can't be done right, you leave no room for others to rise. But when you redefine leadership, when you see yourself as a steward of a vision, and rightly so, because leaders come and go. And last week we looked at the fact that you must, if you are to create a legacy, and if you really served as a leader, then you left the organization better than when you went there. And in leaving it much better, you leave that legacy because persons benefit from the systems you create, the cultures you established, and the presence in your artifacts. Because there are some things that really come from you that benefit the organization, that increase profits, that also increase the brand, magnify the brand, establish it and expanded it. And those things cannot be taken away from you, even 50 years after you leave the organization. And so when we talk about stewardship, that's what happens. Stewards leave a legacy. They make persons become masters of their own destiny. They allow persons to test themselves to see what they can produce. They support persons and they give room for mistakes to be made, because it is in mistakes that innovation and creativity is born. It is really through these mistakes. And so we find ourselves redefining leadership when we understand that we are stewards and we are not owners. When we realize that leadership is really not about control, it's really the guidance, it's really the facilitation. Because we must create systems that can survive. Really must create systems that can survive our silence. When we are not in the organizations, things must run efficiently. And if you are really a steward, that is what happens. When you are an owner, then everything depends on you. So we want to to have that framework, and I am taking it slowly over the weeks because I want us, especially faith-based leaders, to understand that we are stewards and we are not owners. Our space is temporary. We are given a certain time as a leader, but none of us remain leaders forever. None of us remain here forever. And we must really understand that. So leaders really set vision and team owns the execution if we are really honest and going. Even when we rub and run with our teams, we are really giving them autonomy because they are on the ground. They are required to execute, and they are actually required to magnify the vision, to own it, and to carry it so that systems run efficiently and work and profit and productivity is at its highest. So great leaders don't carry everything, they cultivate everything. They steer it, they know, they facilitate, they know what to expect, they understand what the gaps are and what can arise, and they work together to minimize those issues that may arise, the obstacles that are attendant to any decision, any choice, any action, any vision, and the strategies that will minimize or override these gaps. And so I ask you the question, those of us who feel that everything depends on us, what are the conditions that you need to create in your organization if it feels heavy and if you feel that everything is on you? What would you change if your role was to guide and not carry? If you begin to have that mindset where you must guide, you must not carry, because owners carry. They carry their title, the proof of ownership. They carry their authority that's stamped because of the ownership. But stewards understand what the title really means, what ownership is, what is the responsibility that you have, what is likely to change, and how am I going to transition. Stewards understand that ownership is not really what is so important. It is stewardship. So as an owner, how am I going to multiply the gifts and talents that will maximize the profits of my business? Steward. What are the conditions I need to create? How do I create those conditions? And who must I carry with me? Who is the best person? What is the expertise that I need? And to what extent do I need to give these persons their rightful place in my organization? As an owner, how can I steward the outcomes so that it adds value to all of us and everybody benefits? And everybody are at their A game and everybody can test themselves to see what they can produce. What's the autonomy that I'm going to give so that I can create what I call mutual accountability and a community of practice, where persons understand where they are in the organization and how that little thing that they think they're doing contributes to the well-being and overall life and productivity. We have to understand it. So let's look, after we redefine our leadership, after we change our mindset where we become stewards and not owners, when we create those systems that endure our silence, when we have persons testing themselves to see what they can produce, when there is room for the birth of innovation and creativity because mistakes were made, when we understand the gaps and can fill those gaps, then we begin to lead with light. That's the real deal. Everybody knows their purpose, everybody understands the plan. Then we begin to lead with light because that brings clarity instead of pressure. Persons feel safe. They are trusted and they are equipped to trust themselves. They are valued and appreciated. Leadership is shared respectfully. Persons know what they are mastering and what they are still learning. There is a community of practice. There is always room for flexibility and open-mindedness, for new thoughts, for thinking out of the box. There is always that opportunity to be heard and for consensus, leading with light. Light, this light that we are talking is metaphorical because it means that you clarify things with people. A lot of persons in organizations become really disconnected, frustrated, and very discouraged, disconnected, disgruntled because persons expect them to know instead of clarifying. There are ambiguous instructions or directions, especially if there are cases where middle managers are competing for open vacancies that do not exist, and even for those who exist, and they compete and override each other. When there's those issues in organization, there is a lot of chaos and confusion. But when you're leading with light, where the right pressure is applied at the right time, and there is this pressure that comes from the pain, just like giving birth, where you know that you have that type of pressure, but it produces something good. That leading with light gives them the clarity in such a simple way, gives them truth, give them vulnerability, give them authenticity. And so they are able to be themselves and also be their best selves, because unnecessary complexity is removed and persons are taken as they are. Their gifts and talents are clearly seen, and that emotional intelligence that they need to move themselves forward and to become masters of their own destiny, and to ensure that their values are integrated into their roles and their purposes naturally and smoothly. That clarity is extremely important. That light, that simplicity is really important. That light, which is truth, is also important. And so those give the right instructions, those leaders who are leading with light express compassion when it is needed. They are very agile. They do what they are required to do when it's necessary. They know when to be very firm. They know when to support. They know when to give people an opportunity. And they communicate clearly and consistently and sincerely. And they evaluate objectively. And they give people room to grow. And they give themselves the space to grow, to get rid of their old ways. That's powerful. Leading with light comes with self-awareness. They're also aware of their limitations and their strengths, and their team members' limitations and strength. And so they reconcile it. And they understand that life is very, very real, and that they must allow persons to swim in the water because nobody learns to swim on land. And so they create support systems, and they create those rooms, and they create those programs, and they build them into the system so that persons can equip themselves, and when they move on and others come into place, they also have that opportunity to press into their purpose, to integrate their values, to voice whatever needs to be heard, to be innovative and creative. And they come because that trust, which is now a leadership strategy that is built into systems and relationships, and that's through these relationships and these outcomes and the resources, physical, financial, and otherwise, makes them understand that it is really a community of practice. Now, when you're able to do that, it does not mean that your responsibility is not great. It does not mean that you will not have sleepless nights occasionally. It does not mean that you will not plan passionately. What it means is that you're anchored in what really matters, and so you are able to reclaim your energy in leadership. You do not become burnt out because you create moments of connection. You celebrate progress, not just the outcomes, and you put meaning into those small things, and you inbuild the system that joy is not optional, it's fuel to keep persons passionate, alive, engaged, and alert, to keep people flexible, and to actually cement resilience in your organization. Neither is joy a reward for leadership, it's a requirement for sustaining it. So you must position joy as a strategy. You must ensure that the roles and responsibilities and tasks are properly delegated, that expertise are put in place so that things do not become frustrated, that mentors are there, and that the mentees are able to actually learn on the job. You want to make sure that you understand the motivations behind proper delegations, and you want to delegate properly, sorry, and you also want to delegate property, the properties of trust, of respect, of value, of engagement, of evaluation, those properties of productivity and profits that comes through purpose and focus and intention and strategies. When you bring that all together, you're able to reclaim your energy in your leadership, in your organization, and you're able to secure all of the other things that are needed to keep the organization running, competitive, and rewarding. And so the question I want to ask you is, what drains you that you can redesign or release now so you can start beginning to lead with joy? Then you must lead with purpose. Anchoring in what matters most is what I'm talking about, because joy reclaims the energy and purpose reduces overwhelm. So let me repeat that. Joy helps you to reclaim your energy, and purpose helps you to focus on what matters. And so you do not become overwhelmed. It reduces it. And you carry out those actions that are aligned with your core mission and your values. And you say no more consistently, that holy no, because you're going to be setting boundaries. You're going to be setting those boundaries. And some of those boundaries are very simple for executive leaders and educational leaders. Some of these boundaries just mean that somebody just pops in without announcement to say, I just want to run something by you very quickly. But you actually have persons ahead of you who want to do the same thing in relation to the organization. And you say to them, I can't. And they say, it will just take 5 minutes, and you give in. And it takes 3 hours. And other persons who were booked has to wait. Those are simple things that you say no. That appears to be very small things, but become very big things. And so I gave a simple example of what can drain you. What can really drain you. And so you must allow persons to do what they have been trained to do and what they were hired to do. So when you're leading with purpose, it helps you to filter decisions and reduce overload. It helps you to cut initiatives that don't align with your strategic goals. And it helps you to focus your team and keep your team intentional. The fact of the matter is, when you are clear on purpose, very clear on purpose, everything that is unnecessary becomes obvious. Very obvious. In our personal lives, in our jobs, in our communities, in our homes. When families come together and have a purpose, all of the unnecessary things show up. When it is done in an organization, all unnecessary things show up. When it is done personally in your life, where you're doing a reset, all of those unnecessary things become obvious. And so I'm saying to you, when everything feels too much, you want to have your reset moment as I wind down. So first of all, you have to pause before reacting. And talking to those leaders sometimes have that feeling, who are hedging to that ownership trap where everything feels too much. You're afraid to delegate because of what you think might happen. You feel that you have to do it for it to be done right. You feel you must micromanage everybody and double check. They must think like you. It must reflect what are your desired outcomes or expectation. And so when you feel and you find yourself in that trap, when everything now becomes too heavy because you are carrying it, instead of creating those conditions that others can carry what they are to carry, and you can carry what you ought to be carrying, the institution, then you need to pause so that you can respond and not react. You also have to name what is actually overwhelming. And you have to separate urgent from important. Those are extremely effective ways to go. And this is a practical intervention right now in real time, based on how I said before, as we started, leadership is evolving, and the complexity and the unexpected turns that it's taking now in the current space economy, and things that are turning things in another direction and away from the norm, because nothing is now the norm. We are in a new norm. So you have to always take some minutes before responding to your multiple demands. Because most times we do not need more time, because executive leaders, educational leaders, leaders in general always say they just need some more time. They actually don't have enough time in the day. There are not enough hours in the day, but there is. Time is not what you need, it's clarity, more clarity. And so I ask you the question, what is truly urgent right now? Not what feels urgent, but what is truly urgent. And so when you feel like you have too much, I want to introduce a practical reset framework that I use in my faith-based leadership intensive reset. It's a 3R framework that is called release, recenter, and rebuild. So we want to move with that, where we release, recenter, and rebuild. Let me go back to my presentation. So we want to, first of all, release. And as we release, what we want to be looking at our release point is that we want to make sure that we highlight those things that have become overwhelming, and we let go of what is not ours. So we want to identify the tasks that we need to delegate. We want to make sure we identify that task, the task that we need to delegate. We also need to stop solving problems that belong to others. Allow the persons in our organization that have a brain, they do, that are managing their jobs well, who are passing their evaluations, and who are giving you the proper support, meaning that they show up, they are present, there is a community of practice, they're on task, they are productive, and they are contributing value to the organization to solve the problems that belong to them, the heads of departments, to solve the problems that belong to them. Department reps to solve the problems that belong to them in schools, the coordinators and so on, heads of departments also to solve the problems that belong to them, and you solve the problems that belong to you, because there is a chain of command in every organization, and sometimes we do everything. We must also make sure that we honor the trust capability in your team. Honor those things by allowing persons to test themselves so they can produce, to become masters of their own destiny, and to safeguard their team, give the support that is required, because trust must become a strategy. And we have established what we mean by trust. We must trust ourselves and we must trust others. When trust is present, there is shared leadership, there is delegation that balances expertise with loyalty. There is support structures and systems in place to help persons and to maintain and sustain innovation and creativity. There is enough flexibility and there is enough respect for persons to listen to what is said and also to what is not said. So we are right there on target, because as we begin to release those things, we begin to steward much better, and we have the time and the space to be clearer, to become more aware, to observe, and to maintain and refine those systems, because we know what works, what needs to be changed, and we know what's not working. And so we accept now that letting go is not losing control, it's really building capacity. And so it encourages strategic action. So I asked you the question, what are 3 things you can stop owning this week? Step 2 is what I call recentering. So you release and then you recenter. Recentering means that you come back to yourself. You may have lost sight of the vision. Your purpose might have become blurred because of the decision fatigue, the compassion fatigue, the mental and emotional overload. So you want to reconnect with your purpose and your priorities. And you really want to ground yourself before leading others, meaning you want to take time to pause for self-care and soul care. You want to ask God for guidance and for your next steps. And you also want to make sure that you pay attention to those who truly matter and that you set your boundaries so you have time to recover those minutes that you lost, and you have enough time in your day to actually make those decisions, those hard decisions, with clarity and intentionally and with purpose, because it allows you to create the space that you need to think and to get consensus. And what is more important than anything, when you come back to yourself, there is this internal alignment where your mind and your spirit are in one accord, which is also very important, because if you become disconnected in your spirit, then you have a hard time leading yourself. So you need to make sure that you recenter, you block the amount of minutes that you need daily for strategic thinking. Some of us need 10 minutes, some of us need 15, some of us need 30. But there is none of us that can just take 5 minutes. So I just want that to be clear, that it has to be above 5 minutes. recentering, coming back to yourself, reconnecting with purpose and priority at any point, being able to ground yourself and to create those spaces require you to take time away from the noise, from the pressure, from the busyness, and you want to make sure that you block those minutes, whether before you start your day or you take 15 minutes each time throughout the day for your lunch. You do that time to block, to reflect, and before you go to bed or close out your day, you also go into that, blocking those minutes for soul care and self-care. Okay, I see some LinkedIn users are there. Hello. Nice to have you. I'm not able to see your name, but thank you for taking the time. All of you on YouTube and on LinkedIn who are taking the time, I appreciate you. Because this is very important. Recentering is important because you cannot lead clearly if you're internally scattered, or if you're distracted, or if you're burnt out, or if there is fatigue, or if there is other issues. Hi, Alison. It's so great to have you. So great to have you. So I ask you the question, what do you need now to feel grounded? What is preventing you from recentering? Do you need more time? Do you need to write out a vision? Do you need to make that vision clear? Do you need to remind yourself what your purpose is really? Do you know your purpose? Are you fulfilling your purpose where you are standing as a leader? What are you prioritizing? Are you prioritizing the things that truly matter? Are you creating the space so you can think clearly and make decisions with clarity? We want to look at that. And then the third step is rebuilding differently. And what I mean by rebuilding differently is that we need to design sustainable leadership. What do I say? We need to build systems, not dependency, where persons become very dependent on us. They wait for us to make decisions. So they sit and they wait. We want to make sure that we empower decision making at all levels. At all levels. And we normalize shared ownership. Ownership means, because ownership is important, as I said, there must be somebody in charge, there must be somebody that is steering the ship. And shared ownership means that we share the roles and responsibilities that are given, because we have to own those. But we create those environments for persons in their shared ownership roles to steward the mission. Because it's the mission that will carry the organization to its outcomes, the desired outcomes, that will build and establish and expand brands and profitability. It's not the ownership. Ownership just points to who is the steward. Ownership says who is in charge here, who will be the one to steward this part of the mission, and who will you work with in one accord to create this community of practice, this sustained system, this design that when persons pass away or pass along, the system is still in place. It is still sustained. It can outlive the silence because it's not built on dependency. It's built on expertise, strategy, and need. Yes, very much so, Dr. Leslie. That's part of the Eisenhower matrix or the COVID's 4 quadrants, very much so. So what is the shift that we have to make for this practical reset? And which of the R's do you need the most? Is it that you need to recenter yourself, so you go back to what your purpose is, you remind yourself of your purpose, and you make sure your priorities are in line? Is it that you need to rebuild differently, or do you need to release, let go of what isn't yours? Do you need to come back to yourself, which is the recenter, and do you need to design sustainable leadership systems Which of those do you need? Because the reality is, for leadership to become stewardship, you have to shift from quick fixes. You want to look at structural change. You want to make sure you look at where you can replace dependence with empowerment, because your leadership that makes sense, that is sustainable, really empowers others to become their best self. And so you want to create those systems, those decision frameworks, those output frameworks, those support frameworks for your team. And by the way, sustainable leadership is designed, it's not improvised. You don't learn by the way, you put measures in place to stop gaps of support, of empowerment, of change, of transformation, of resilience. And so let's look at how you integrate it in your leadership. How do I lead with light, joy, and purpose? You have learned that you don't have to carry everything. Leadership can, in fact, feel lighter. And your role is to really create conditions for others to strive. How do you do that? You start small. You delegate one decision today instead of owning it, one step at a time. And change in leadership begins with one conscious choice. So you want to practice the daily awareness of making conscious choices. And you also want to model for your team. What do you model? Realistic implementations. You look at what will in fact work and what can't work. Because sometimes we want to try things even though the blind can see that it will not work. So you want to encourage realistic implementation. You want to delegate one decision instead of owning it. And you want to understand that every one of these things begin with a conscious choice. That is how we change, we grow, we get rid of old ways. And so I ask the question, what is one shift you will make immediately after this session? Who do you become as a leader when you stop carrying everything? Because the fact of the matter is, the most powerful leaders are not the ones who carry the most, but those who unlock the most in others. And that is where I want to end tonight, because I want to say to you, if you understand, if you find yourself being in any of the things I have described as your leadership, the ownership trap, if you're finding it very hard to delegate, if you're feeling that you have to do it for it to be right, if you're feeling that you must show up, you must always be present, if you feel that you must micromanage, if you're finding yourself double checking everything and your staff is actually waiting, very productive, capable staff members find that they have to be waiting on you to make final decisions. And every decision you have to be a part of. If you find that there is a deficit in trust, you want to maybe join the faith-based, it's monthly, faith-based leadership reset, where we provide you with emotional clarity and your strategic map and your 7-day action steps, which includes the 3R framework to expand your leadership and to align it with your purpose so you can lead with joy and with clarity. And you can, in fact, make the difference you want to make. And you can, in fact, empower and equip persons to become masters of their own destiny, which is really what you're created to do. Whatever your niche is, whatever your purpose is, God established you to serve with those gifts and talents a particular group. And he tells you how you are to serve them. There are persons who are benefiting greatly from this reset. There's another way you can also start to get clarity and renewed faith. In every season, you can actually grab a copy of My Faith Looks Up. It is a leadership devotional guide, and it pulls in many of the tenets of what I'm presenting each at each podcast. And then you can also download your free guide that you get for building as a executive steward. So there's an executive steward guide that you can download that I would encourage you to download. It is free and it starts you on your way. You can also book your free executive stewardship strategy session to claim your breakthroughs, to see what our programs are and how you can become a part of any of our programs, which are really three. I also encourage you to subscribe to my Christian Essential newsletter because you get tips and strategies on how to really overcome as a faith-based executive leader or educational leader or simply a leader. There's a paid version and there's a free version. And so the paid version just takes you a few steps more. Thank you so much for joining today. Have a blessed and purposeful self-care tonight. And remember, you're not just a leader, you are a divine vessel with a sacred assignment. God doesn't want us to serve from empty, He wants us to serve from overflow. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Dr. Leslie. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Frank, Nastasia, all of those who are on YouTube. Thank you, those who will be watching the replay. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Lisa. I see you. And thank you all for joining. Have a very good night and see you next week when we talk about another very practical and relevant topic about leadership and life. God bless you all and thank you again.